and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence. May God bless the victims, their families, and America. Thank you very much.
We've been watching President Bush, who was down in Florida for what was...
Okay, we're coming back. As you just heard, the president speaking about this incident, which he clearly called, or did he?
He seemed to imply that, in fact, it was what looks to be a terrorist act. His remarks very brief, saying only that he had pledged the full resources of the federal government to go to the victims and of the families as well, and also a concerted federal effort to hunt down those responsible, saying that terrorist acts against the United States will not, under any circumstances, be tolerated.
We're understanding that dozens of injuries, people who are injured, have been sent to St. Vincent's Hospital. St. Vincent's is expecting hundreds of more injuries, 100 people, and you could expect that considering there are 40,000 people who work at the World Trade Center towers. This is an unbelievable thing. President Bush was reading to school kids in Sarasota, Florida, when he took a time out to speak about this incident. As you get, again, as you said, Michael, the Mayor Giuliani, is planning to speak at any time now from Park Place and Church Street, which is not too far from the scene. So as soon as he begins to speak, we'll go down to him. We're sending crews out to the scene as well, waiting on Marcella Palmer to get set up and give us what she knows.
The New York City Fire Department asking now all firefighters to return to duty immediately. A department spokesman saying that the firefighters who are off duty or who are on vacation should still report because of what you're seeing here live at the World Trade Center. The pictures provided by Chopper 2, pictures all across the city that we've been following for you for the last hour. This is a live picture, but moments ago, the second impact, the second plane that struck Tower 2 was captured on tape, and you're looking at it right now. Again, this is videotape happening 18 minutes
apart
after the first impact. You saw it as we saw it as it happened. The first impact happening just before 9 o'clock this morning. The second impact 18 minutes after. And again, you were looking there at videotape of that second impact. 40,000 people working at the trade centers. We have no word at this point just how many were in their offices at the time of the crashes. I can back now live, courtesy of Chopper 2.
Michael, we're just hearing one of our information partners, CNN, is reporting that one of the planes was an American Airlines 767 from Boston, a Boeing 767 from Boston, according to our information partner, CNN. We're not sure which plane that was, if it was the first airplane or the second. Again, looking into the possibility of a hijacking, a possible suicide mission, the FBI on high alert. All bridges, tunnels leading into New York City have been closed.
All three
airports have been closed, all under the command of the Port Authority, which ironically is based at the World Trade Center. Also, the Emergency Command Center, that's supposed to be bomb-proof and earthquake-proof, is at 7 World Trade Center across the street there. President Bush, as you see on the bottom of your screen, is calling the crashes terrorist attacks, and he is pledging to a full-scale investigation to hunt down and find the people responsible for it. Marcia Kramer, you're in the newsroom. What can you tell us?
Well, I can tell you now that New York City is going on high alert. It's going into what you would call its terrorist alert. They've established a no-fly zone over all of Manhattan. The Lincoln-Holland tunnels have been closed. The George Washington Bridge is closed coming into the city. Also, the Queens Midtown Tunnel and the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel are in the process of closing the lanes coming into Manhattan. They are not letting any traffic come into Manhattan. They are trying to get everybody to leave the city. There is a no-fly zone over all of Manhattan, and all of the bridges and tunnels are in the process of being closed. I can also tell you that the first casualty has been brought into Beekman Downtown Hospital. It was a young man in his 20s. He came in with blood gushing out of his arm. The New York City Fire Department has put in a call to all fire department members, firefighters, and others who work in the department to come in even if they are off duty. Again, New York City is going into a high terrorist alert, trying to make sure that there are no further attacks on any of our landmarks, our bridges, or our tunnels. This is a normal procedure that New York City puts in place when they have to deal with something like this. It was a procedure that was developed after the bombing of the World Trade Center, which happened in 1993. I can tell you that witnesses are telling us that they have seen paper and pieces of office material flying through the air, drifting over Brooklyn about 3 miles from the tower. That happened after the first attack. Again, New York City going into a high alert, closing off Manhattan, trying to protect its bridges and tunnels. The UN, the United Nations, has been evacuated. The stock exchange has been evacuated. These are two of the landmarks in New York City that police and FBI officials have regarded as potential targets of terrorist attack. Again, we have also learned that FBI offices all across the country have been put on high alert for the possibility that there could be terrorist attacks other places in the country. Again, President Bush said that he called it an apparent terrorist attack, but it will take some time for the FBI, New York City Police Department, and others to determine exactly what happened. Lisa and Michael?
Marsha, have you had any contact at all with the governor's office? Because the Associated Press reporting that Governor Pataki in Manhattan today, that's what the office in Albany is apparently telling the Associated Press, although the staff not saying where the governor was at the time. Do we expect to hear from him, and do you know where he is?
Well, I think that President Bush himself said that he had been in contact with Governor Pataki. I wouldn't be surprised to find Governor Pataki showing up at the same press conference with Mayor Giuliani. At this point in time, it seems it would make a lot of sense for the governor and the mayor to deal with this together. We have another report. All of Lower Manhattan subways have been closed. They are trying to keep people out of Lower Manhattan so that they can clear the streets to evacuate the people who may have been injured or if there are any fatalities. Right now we have no reports on the number of people injured, on the number of people who are trying to be evacuated from other floors in the building. But what they're trying to do is keep as many people as possible out of Lower Manhattan so that you can get the emergency vehicles to the scene. You need fire trucks, you need as many ambulances as possible, and so you're going to need to keep as many people away from the scene as possible. That's all we have for now. Back to Michael and Lisa.
Okay, Marcia, thanks a lot. We were told a few minutes ago that dozens of injured people were at St. Vincent's, and St. Vincent's is one of the hospitals expecting hundreds of more people to be taken to St. Vincent's. Beekman Downtown Hospital, the first casualty, we understand, was a man in his 20s who came in with blood gushing out of his arm, according to what Marcia found out. Again, ladies and gentlemen, no-fly zone over the entire area. The only bridge that's open is an outbound GWB. That's the bridge that's opened. Otherwise, the Lincoln and the Holland going into the city are closed. The Queens Midtown Tunnel, about to be closed, is in the process of being closed. They're trying to keep everybody from coming down into this area and trying to get people out. Stock exchange closed. The UN evacuated. Stock exchange evacuated. Debris is still drifting miles from the scene as we look at the effects there of two airplanes crashing into the World Trade Center. The first one from witnesses was a small, according to eyewitnesses, a small plane, apparently, a twin engine possibly, or a boat. And then we had another report that it might have been a 737. And then CNN reporting
that one plane, apparently an American Airlines 767 from Boston. That according to CNN. And another quick reminder that the Jersey State Police saying that all Hudson River bridges and tunnels closed as a precaution. And as Marcia Kramer mentioned, that this is just standard operating procedure in a crisis like this, especially what happened after the bombings in the World Trade Center. And then all of these systems then become implemented. And the mayor, as well as the governor, we expect to hear from shortly. You'd heard earlier from President Bush, who seemed to sound reasonably certain that these were terrorist attacks, though, of course, we haven't the final confirmation saying that they are apparent terrorist attacks. The president pledging full support of the federal government, as would be expected for both the victims, their families, and also to launch a full-scale investigation to hunt down those responsible, saying that terrorist acts against the United States under no circumstances will be tolerated. He's obviously quite shaken. He was just prepped as he was speaking to children in Sarasota, Florida. His aides came in, told him what happened. He made his way to a podium to address the country as soon as he could. His remarks very brief, but in essence that's what he was saying. All of the government's resources will be going toward the victims and their families, and as well as an effort to hunt down those responsible.
All right, Michael, we have an eyewitness here, Beverly Marone, who lives 16 blocks from the World Trade Center. Beverly, good morning. You saw the second plane crash into tower number 2?
Yes, I did.
We have video. We saw it live here, but we're going to replay the videotape for those of you who did not see this unbelievable scene here of an airplane crashing into tower number 2 just 18 minutes after another airplane crashed into tower number 1. Beverly, what did you see exactly?
All right, I saw the second plane. My cat woke me up for the first fire. She was hysterical, so I came to the window to see why, because that's where she was running, and I saw the first fire. And a few minutes later, I mean, I don't know exactly, I saw this plane that looked blue and red. My eyesight's not great,
no.
so don't
worry. Another eyewitness described the plane as blue and red as well.
And it was big. I mean, you know, it was certainly not a toy plane. From this window, it's big. And it went into exactly where the fire is coming out of the second part of the the second building of the World Trade Center, the building south of where I live.
Sure.
Okay, Beverly, thank you very much for your insight. Hope you stay safe down there. Let's go back to Marcia Kramer in the newsroom for some further developments. Marcia?
Well, we're now able to confirm from reports we've just received that the first plane to hit the World Trade Center, that's Tower 1, was a plane that was hijacked from Boston. It was a 757 from Boston. Again, we have reports that the first plane to hit World Trade Center 1 was a 757 out of Boston. That was a plane that had been hijacked. That apparently was the plane that was being investigated by the FBI just before the tragedy occurred. Again, the 757 out of Boston was the first plane to hit the World Trade Center. We have no...
Tappan Zee Bridge and come back down?
You may want to try that out. Let me take a look right now and see how my Tappan Zee Bridge camera looks. Just bear with me for 1 second, and I'll tell you. Actually, it looks like right now traffic heading into Westchester is moving, but it's at a crawl. Again, at this point, you know, things are happening so rapidly. If you were to leave home in Westchester right now, I can't tell you you'd definitely be able to get into town in another half an hour, 40 minutes or so.
Well, it sounds to me like
Jane, we're just getting a report that there's been an attack on the Pentagon. This is the Pentagon. This is from the network. This is the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia.
These are pictures that have just come in to us here at News Channel 4. You are looking at live pictures of what appears to be an attack on the Pentagon. We can tell you nothing more than what you were looking at. This is approximately an hour ago that we had one airplane crash into the northern of the World Trade Center towers, and about 18 minutes later another airplane crashed into the southern of the towers, and now we have this.
We also hear that the first plane that hit the World Trade Center was apparently hijacked after takeoff from Boston. It means there's a very good possibility that that plane did have some passengers on board.
Do we know what kind of an airplane is it? What does it say? It doesn't say?
At this time, it does not say. It just says the first plane that hit the World Trade Center was hijacked after takeoff from Boston. That according to a U.S. official.
Now, according to the pilot that we had on a few minutes ago, he said that appeared to be a smaller jet, business type of jet.
Yes.
So perhaps it was some sort of a commuting airline or something like that. Let us go back and listen to what President Bush had to say a few moments ago. This was before this latest explosion at the Pentagon.
Today we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed
this country. I think they'll also be protecting the Capitol and other important buildings in the Washington area. Right now, not only New York City on high alert, but Washington, D.C. as well. The Pentagon has been hit by an aircraft. The Pentagon hit by an aircraft. It is on fire. You can see those pictures on one side of your screen. On the other side of the screen, you can see the World Trade Center, which was hit by two planes. The first plane that hit the World Trade Center was a plane that was hijacked from Boston. As a result of that, we can also tell you that Logan Airport in Boston has also been closed. New York City airports are closed. Bridges and tunnels coming into Manhattan have all been closed. Anything that could be a further terrorist target is now being closed down as New York City and apparently the Capitol go into a high terrorist alert. There's also a new report right now, you're not going to believe this, of a fire on the Washington Mall. So there's now 2 targets in the Washington area. First the Pentagon, and now a fire on the Washington Mall. There's no indication what has caused that fire, but the Washington Mall is on fire. Expect further evacuations of buildings in Washington, as well as further evacuations of buildings here in Manhattan. That's all I have to report. Back to Michael and Lisa.
Quite a lot there, Marcia. Thank you. Washington Mall, of course, a big tourist spot there. As you look live at some of the tape, or this is tape of apparently a casualty from the World Trade Center bombing.
From crews on the ground here, this is rather from the plane crash.
Yes, from the plane crash.
We had reports, one confirmed casualty. We don't think it's a reach to assume that there will be far more, in that 40,000 people work in the trade centers. As you look, only a live picture on your left as the fires continue to burn at the World Trade Center. This is unedited unedited videotape from the ground level.
Is this Beth Israel or St. Vincent's that we're looking at? We're trying to ascertain. Of course, St. Vincent's has already received dozens of people coming in. They're expecting hundreds of more. All the hospitals, Beekman Downtown Hospital, all the hospitals are on high alert as well, as you're expecting hundreds, possibly thousands of injuries. Again, ladies and gentlemen, in case you just missed it, the Pentagon has been hit by a plane. Witnesses saw a tail of a plane strike the Pentagon. As you look live at New York City's 2 Trade Center buildings on fire from 2 apparent airplanes going into it. One was, the first plane crash was from an American Airlines 757 out of Boston that had been hijacked. The second airplane we're trying to get beat on as far as what type of aircraft that was, also a large plane. Logan Airport in Boston has been closed because of it, as are all of our airports, no doubt, our subway system as well. As we look live on the right side as well, that is flames and black smoke billowing from the Pentagon as that aircraft was hit just a few moments ago, 9:40 this morning.
Should point out as well that there's also a fire reported in the Washington Mall. No confirmation as to the cause of that. And the west wing of the White House and the Capitol buildings have been evacuated amid the concerns over terrorist threats.
Sure.
You heard the president addressing the nation briefly just moments ago after only the 2 plane crashes. I shouldn't say only, but before we had word of the Pentagon plane crash. He spoke to the country briefly. We have those remarks for you. Perhaps we can take a listen, and if you're just joining us, you can get caught up with what the president had to say.
Let's go to Michael Slattery live on the scene. Michael, take it away. John Slattery, I'm sorry. John Slattery. Are you ready? Okay, we were told John was ready. We're going to continue on with our coverage. As you look at a split screen, folks, at an unbelievable scene. Marcia Kramer, what's an update for us? She's in our newsroom.
Well, we just have a little bit more information, Lisa. Apparently that plane out of Boston that left Logan Airport had sent out a radio transmission, a probably coded radio transmission to air traffic controllers that it had been hijacked. That's why the FBI was investigating it, and eventually that was the plane that crashed, the first crash into World Trade Center 1. Again, the plane that crashed into World Trade Center 1 had previously sent out a radio transmission that it had been hijacked. But given the fact that the route from Boston to New York is a very small one, the FBI probably didn't have enough time to stop the plane before it crashed into World Trade Center 1. They simply didn't have enough time with the radio alert to stop the plane or get another plane into the air to head it off before it crashed into the World Trade Center. As we've told you, there are now 3 airplanes that have crashed into major landmarks in our country, 2 into the World Trade Center, 1 into the Pentagon. Again, there's a fire on the Washington Mall. We don't know at this time if the fire was caused by another plane or it was set by somebody on the ground. We're also closing New York City, and federal investigators are in a high terrorist alert. There's a no-fly zone over all of Manhattan. All the bridges and tunnels are closed. The subways in lower Manhattan have been closed. and there are other evacuations expected as this story develops. Lisa and Michael, back to you.
Okay, there, Marsha, you're recapping very well for us. So all of this happened unbelievably. It's starting right before 9 a.m. Mr. Bush is down in Sarasota, Florida, and he called this an apparent terrorist attack before the Pentagon was hit.
Talk about that a little bit more in just a moment. In the meantime, Rose Walia, one of our reporters, joining us now from what we believe is very near the scene. Rose?
Well, Michael, right now there is bedlam here at Bellevue Hospital. They're expecting many, many patients. So far, 2 have arrived here. It seemed that the injuries were minor. I was inside the hospital just a short time ago, and alarms were going off. Right now, they're on external disaster, a very high alert at this hospital. Everybody gearing up for this disaster. And here on the FDR, continuously there are sirens just whizzing by, police cars, fire department, and ambulances. And here, right across the street, we can see the plume of smoke coming from Lower Manhattan. Certainly very visible here. They're expecting, as I said, many, many patients. Could be thousands of patients, hundreds of patients. As I had mentioned, administrators scrambling for additional staff right now. It's crazy inside of the emergency room. Everybody's standing outside of the emergency room doors, waiting in anticipation for ambulances to arrive here. We'll have much more for you later on today. We're live at Bellevue Hospital. Rose Walia, CBS 2, back to you.
Okay,
Bellevue.
Rose, we
Okay,
want to know
Rose.
where we were. We didn't hear you. So we're still efforting John Slattery. Marcella Palmer also on her way down there, trying to set up and give us the latest details. We're going to check back with Rose in just a few moments. The FAA has shut down all aircraft takeoffs across the nation because of this. We just were told that, according to the Associated Press. The FAA has shut down all aircraft takeoffs across the country, nationwide, because of 2 airplanes hitting World Trade Center Tower number 1 and number 2, as well as the Pentagon being hit by an airplane some 12 minutes ago.
On the subject of the Pentagon, John Hatcher joining us now from Washington. John, we understand you had some of a view
Yes, sir.
of what had happened. What did you see?
Well, about 9:30 or so, I heard a rumble that shook the windows in my apartment. So I went into my mom's room and I looked out the window, and I could see this huge plume of smoke going straight up into the sky. So I started freaking because of the World Trade Center.
And did you see, and then you saw the Pentagon?
Well, yeah, and then I saw on television that apparently possibly a helipad at the Pentagon had been blown up. And the plume of smoke now stretches from the Pentagon southward towards on the Shirley Highway, which is, I live right next to the Shirley Highway in Arlington, Virginia.
All right, John, thanks very much. John Hatcher, a witness there near the Pentagon fire where the plane had struck there not too long ago. Right now, let's go turn our attention back to New York City and our own John Slattery, who's got an update for us. John? John, are you there?
Fine, I got it.
Go ahead.
Just tell me when, Jim.
Go ahead. We hear the alarms, obviously. It's going to be going on.
All right, I'm at the corner of West Street and Murray, and it's organized chaos here right now. We've got police who have been evacuating people from the World Financial Center, which is just across West Street from the World Trade Center. And as you can see, let's spin around here for just a second. What we've had here are thousands of people. Let's keep going around. Let's keep going around. We've had thousands of people who have been evacuated from various buildings around here. And what we heard about 20 minutes ago from a man who identified himself as a member of the White House advance staff, he came up to me and he said that he'd heard that a 3rd plane was coming in. Now, shortly after that, a police captain came up to me and urged us to get out of the area. We were about 2 blocks closer. He also said that their word from Washington was that a 3rd plane was coming in. Whether or not that is going to materialize, we don't have any word right now. But with that, what happened was everyone who'd been evacuated from the World Financial Center across the street and who were merely outside the building across the street were then moved about 2 blocks farther away. And in just about the last 5 or 10 minutes, all of the people, thousands of people who were gathered around me right here, were moved back at least another half a block. The police are trying to get a handle on just the crowd control here. And meanwhile, what we saw, if we can look up at the building, you've undoubtedly already seen this as well, but a number of people were apparently jumping from windows. We saw at least 5 or 6. One man told me that he knew of about 10, but an FBI agent confirmed 5, and then with a few minutes after that, we saw a 6th person jump out. So we're unsure as to how many fatalities might be involved in this, but in looking at the people who were standing there absolutely horrified to watch this, many people started screaming, many people started crying, there were people hugging each other, and every time they saw a person jump to his death, there were people who were just grabbing hold of each other and sobbing and wiping their faces and wiping their tears. It's an unbelievable scene here. If we can look around behind us, we've got, sir, could you please move a little? We've got a helicopter taking off over there, and what we were told was that this field was being set up as a medevac location. There are at least, scores and scores of. Now this one's coming in to a closer vantage point. We've had scores and scores of ambulances in the area here. That helicopter is in fact taking off. He was just circling around to get a better angle of attack on his takeoff. As far as the fire control, we have no idea as to what that situation is, but debris continues to rain down from up above, and as of about 5 minutes ago, we were still seeing fire on some of the floors of World Trade. Now, I saw the second plane hit. I did not see the first plane hit, but the second plane was an unmarked silver fuselage. It appeared to be twin engine. I couldn't tell if it was prop or jet, and it took a slight bank and went right into the side of World Trade 2, and having had the first one go in, the second one obviously appeared to be a suicide flight. So the only thing that we can assume here is that they were both suicide flights going in, and as I said before, there's unconfirmed word that even a third plane was on its way here. The disposition of that, we don't know. Now, the studio, I can't hear you right now, but let me go back to you.
John Slattery, thanks very much. He's over at West Street, and Murray,
Lower Manhattan,
giving us our first account of things from ground level. Let's go back to the newsroom now. Marcia Kramer following the developments from that vantage point. Marcia?
Well, we're now getting some picture of the breadth of this national catastrophe. First of all, the White House was evacuated, the entire White House, after the Secret Service received a credible threat, I repeat, a credible threat of a terrorist act against the presidential mansion and residence. But that's not the only building that's been evacuated. We now can report that the State Department, the Capitol, and the Treasury buildings are also being evacuated. And believe it or not, in Los Angeles, they are on a tactical alert, and they are starting to evacuate key buildings in that part of the country as well. So now we have a terrorist alert that goes from the East Coast to the West Coast. Here in New York, we have the terrorist alert because the World Trade Center, both towers were hit by planes. In Washington, a terrorist alert because the Pentagon was hit by a plane and there's a fire on the Washington Mall. And LA has a tactical alert where they are beginning to evacuate buildings. And then there is also another decision by the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration. No planes are going to be allowed to take off from any airport in this entire country. No planes will be taking off today. They have made a decision to stop all air traffic control, all air traffic.
Marcia, we got to interrupt you. We just saw live from Chopper 2 yet another explosion. Did anybody, Janine, what did you see? You thought, was it an airplane or was it a...
It looked like a part of the building, if not most of the top, collapsed, and all the debris from the building was falling down towards the ground.
Look at the smoke. Look at the smoke. This is
the whole building. Did it collapse?
Do we have Jim Smith available on microphone from Chopper 2 as he takes these pictures? Jim?
Yes, I am here, Michael.
Jim, tell us what's happening out there.
Oh my
We just witnessed some kind of secondary follow-up explosion on the World Trade Center number 2, the one that is on the south, that is difficult to make out through the debris and smoke, but it does appear that the top portion of the building has collapsed down to the streets below.
Oh my gosh.
Unbelievable we have seen here, the debris and smoke just covering the entire portion of lower Manhattan.
Oh my gosh.
Jim, we know this is terribly difficult for everybody. We're asking that you please stay with us, hold your shot, stay with us on audio. We should tell people our crews have been running from that scene, as have everybody, and the entire area has been under an evacuation for some time. And just moments ago, you saw it here live from Chopper 2, a horrific scene as one of the towers there appears to have collapsed from what had happened earlier. A quick chronology as you continue to look live. Just before 9 o'clock this morning, word of a plane crash into Tower 1 that had been confirmed, a 757 hijacked out of Boston was the first impact. 18 minutes later, a second plane impacted Tower 2. Not long after that,
videotape of that second crash.
Not long after this second impact that you will see here on tape, happening 18 minutes after the first impact,
and then
was the fire at the Pentagon.
Right, about 9:30 this morning.
Also confirmed,
and this is the collapse. We're
from the
showing you, this
Associated
is the
Press.
collapse, ladies and gentlemen, on videotape. The collapse that just happened. Unbelievable.
Let's go to Marcia Kramer now in the newsroom as she watches what you're seeing at home right now. Marcia?
Well, the real concern right now for New York City emergency rescue squads is to get people on the ground away from that scene as soon as possible. If you live in the area, if you live in Battery Park City or any of the other housing developments in that area, you should leave the area. You should evacuate the area and get away from the scene. Right now, what police have to determine is whether that explosion was caused from the initial impact of the plane or whether it was something that was exploded on the ground. Generally speaking, for something to collapse in on itself like that, it would seem to indicate, obviously this is just early speculation, but it would seem to indicate that there could have been an explosion, a bomb planted on the ground that would make the building collapse within itself. But nevertheless, a collapse did happen, and they need to get as many people away from the scene as possible. If you live in the area, if you live in Battery Park City, the best thing that you can do for yourself to keep yourself safe is to leave the area as fast as possible. The important thing now is for people, emergency service people, all the firemen, the policemen, the EMS technicians to be able to get to the scene and to help as many people as possible, people who are still alive and people who possibly could be evacuated from the other World Trade Center building that's next door. They want to minimize the amount of loss of life as much as possible.
A lot of emotions I should share with you up in the newsroom too, as we hear these just gut-wrenching eyewitness accounts of what these people must be going through, especially in the Twin Towers right now. Just amazing.
We have just been told that this, what we thought was another explosion, was indeed, according to the Associated Press, another building that has either been attacked or exploded. So it appears to be separate from the two that we have already witnessed this morning. And if you take a look at this scene right now, the smoke that is billowing over Lower Manhattan is truly a frightening sight to see. Again, the part that I think concerns all of us is that we have no knowledge of what happened to the people who might have been inside any of those buildings. It's a normal workday, and although the first explosion came early, it might have meant some people weren't there yet, but I guarantee you that there are a lot of people who were already in those buildings.
Sure, in the Twin Trade Towers, a lot of state workers in those buildings who get there well before 9 o'clock. And as you come down some of the major arteries in Manhattan, you can just see this smoke from miles away. A very eerie sight as I was coming towards Midtown. You look up, and there's the smoke coming out of the World Trade Center.
How did you come to work today?
I actually walked most of the way because traffic is, as you would imagine, a complete mess. Emergency vehicles trying to make their way all down to downtown to Lower Manhattan. So it's difficult for anybody who's trying to get around. Bridges and tunnels, as you've been mentioning, are closed. So getting on and off the island isn't going to happen right now.
Hey, Jim, right now we have a terrorism expert on the telephone, Harvey Kushner. Harvey, can you hear me?
I can hear you very well.
Harvey, this obviously has all the earmarks of terrorism.
Yes, unfortunately it does. And, you know, I've been in this business almost 40 years. And quite frankly, I couldn't have written a scenario like this. If I would have come forward with something like a possibility like this, they would have laughed. I mean, this has all of the worst case scenarios put together into one. This is monumental. This will be something that, you got Gary Condon in the news, you have OJ. This is something that we're going to be looking at for the next couple of years, unfortunately, and not just from a media perspective, but from the people who've witnessed this. I mean, when you think of the psychological trauma this is going to cause to New Yorkers and to Americans, it's monumental. It's off
you see the scope of this and the methodical way in which it appears to have been planned and happened? And again, we don't know what truly occurred, but there's talk of aircraft being hijacked,
Right.
of second explosions, of et cetera, et cetera. What, if there are signals you can read in that as an expert on all of this, what can you tell us about that?
Well, it shows that, in the last couple of years, and I just got off of the embassy bombing trial. I was involved in that, and I've seen a picture painted of Osama bin Laden, not to say that he's involved in this necessarily, but of his network and his ability to try to do damage to the United States. And over the last couple of years, a lot of terrorism experts worldwide have been talking about the day of the freelancer, for those not familiar with the term, individuals who do things by themselves. Obviously, this type of event which occurred today is something that costs a lot of money, a lot of planning, such as what happened in the embassy bombing trial, had to blow up 2 embassies. And obviously, they had the will and the desire, many people, to be able to pull something like this off. I mean, think about hijacking a plane, the difficulties involved in that, but yet to have it flown into a building is just monumental in terms of timing, in terms of the ability of the number of people on that plane. I mean, if I had to surmise, I would think it wasn't just one individual. It had to be groups of individuals to be able to control something like that, to pull something like this off. And if the reports are true that we're having a coordinated attack at other American targets, such as the Pentagon or the White House or other buildings, this indicates that we're facing a new era. We're back to the old state sponsorship, large groups being involved.
Also, the New Jersey State Police have now opened an emergency command center of their own in New Jersey to try to assist New York in trying to deal with this incredible, incredible tragedy. Now, for parents of students who go to schools in the area, there are, in addition to Stuyvesant High School, which is a high school for gifted kids, there are also 2 elementary schools that are in the Battery Park City houses. The children are said to be safe at the present time, but school officials are saying that if parents want to go to school and take their kids away from there, they are welcome to do so. Again, though, those children are safe at the present time. That's all we have for now, Michael and Lisa, back to you.
There's also daycare centers on Wall Street, I know for sure, because my stepdaughter used to go to a daycare center right on Wall Street, right on Wall Street. And you got to worry about those small kids as well as the children at the elementary schools. But the word we're getting is that they're safe and they're being kept in school. But again, parents can come down and get their children if they so desire, which is completely understandable as you look at this scene. New York City, as you see from our breaking news bulletin, is on full terrorist alert. Planes have crashed into the building. The latest incident just happened a few minutes ago, right at 10 o'clock, where the top of the World Trade Center number 2 building, I believe, is that right, Michael? Or number 1 building. Number 1 building was the building that was hit by the bombing in '93. But the building has collapsed, and according to Marshall, we understand that it collapsed onto another building down below.
Nearby fires raging. Rose Walia at the scene near Bellevue Hospital with an update. Rose, what can you tell us?
Well, a lot of ambulances coming in and out of here at Bellevue Hospital, and they're expecting many more patients now that one of the towers has collapsed. You can see here on the FDR, they have actually shut it down to normal traffic. They're only allowing emergency vehicles through to Lower Manhattan at this point. And we understand right now administrators scrambling to find additional personnel. Right now, cell phones and the phones inside of the hospital are down, so they're having trouble communicating with their internal staff and to find doctors and nurses to come in and deal with this unbelievable situation. Here they are on external disaster, a very high alert at this hospital, but they're doing their best. Hospital administrators waiting outside, doctors and nurses waiting outside of this hospital, waiting for these patients to come here and get the best help as possible. Certainly a tragic situation. A lot of people here feeling very, very depressed and sad at the fact that a New York landmark has been destroyed in such a way. We're live at Bellevue Hospital. Rose Walia, CBS 2, back to you.
Okay, Rose. And the entire city in gridlock. Everybody's in a state of shock. New York City, an entire state of shock.
Again, just a reminder, if you're joining us now, you're looking at live pictures from Chopper 2 at the remaining tower, World Trade Center tower that's still standing. The second tower there had collapsed just moments ago. Marcia Kramer still in the newsroom as we take a look at both the live picture and tape of the scene just after just as that tower
collapse.
Second tower collapsed.
That's on the left side of your screen.
Marcia, you have an update for us?
Well, yes. Now, a source is telling the Associated Press that the second plane that hit World Trade Center 2 may actually have been flying out of Newark Airport, which would have enabled it to get there very quickly and would have accounted for only the 18-minute gap between the crash into the World Trade Center 1 and the crash into World Trade Center 2. Again, we had the first plane that came out of Boston. It was apparently hijacked out of Boston, came and hit World Trade Center 1, and apparently now a source is telling the Associated Press that the plane that hit World Trade Center 2 had flown out of Newark Airport. The State Emergency Management Office is actually also being evacuated, and now state and local officials are trying to clamp down on exactly what their security plan is. For obvious reasons, they don't want to telegraph their moves to any terrorists that may be on the ground listening and trying to cause further upset to both New York, Washington, or any place else around the country.
We're looking at, thank you, Marcia. We're looking at a live picture on the right side of your screen. On the left side, in case you missed it, the second plane that went into World Trade Center Tower number 2. That's a replay of a tape on the left side of your screen.
Let's bring in a guest on our studio, Michael Hirschman. He is the president of Decision Strategies, an international security and counterterrorism firm. Michael, what can you tell us that has not already been said from what we've seen?
Well, we know very little at this point about who's responsible for this tragedy.